Welcome to Two Brave Unicorns, the podcast where Keri and Jill highlight people, companies, and nonprofits who are out to make change through innovation and by doing good. Today on our show, we have Vance Brown, who is a real-life unicorn. And I'm so happy to have you here, Vance, and I appreciate your time. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your origin story, and especially about how you're a unicorn.
Wow. Thanks, Keri. Jill, nice to meet you. Well, I mean, assuming by unicorn, you mean I don't have $1 billion, if that's what you mean. Now, that being said, maybe just to be clear, that being said, have I built a unicorn company? Yes. But I wouldn't say that's been the thing I'm most proud of or that it really matters, because there's just so much to that of being in the right place, right time, market conditions, and all that. But in terms of origin story, how far you want me to go back, Keri?
Wherever you want to start. I think it's just interesting for people to know where you started, where you are now today, what kind of your passions are as of late.
Yeah. So I grew up in a place called Durham, North Carolina, which happens to be where I'm sitting today. And so this is a high-tech region, you might say, but it wasn't back then so much. I went to college at a place called Wake Forest University. If you're basketball fans, think Tim Duncan, Chris Paul. We have quite our own. It's not just Duke, Carolina, although Duke University is located here. Big basketball fan, as you can imagine, college basketball, because I grew up here. So then I went to law school at the University of North Carolina. And in undergrad, I got into technology, and this was way early. There weren't degrees really there in computer science, but I ended up liking it. And this is before IBM PCs. This is way back before you were born. But I just knew that it was something special and that's going to impact the world. And so I went to law school with the idea of getting involved in this new area of law called computer law. Like, how do we protect this new form of intellectual property called computer software? Like, how's that going to be done? It was just so new, could be a part of evolution of all that. So I went to law school and then started with a firm here doing intellectual property out in Research Triangle Park. We represented entrepreneurs, high tech is right where I wanted to be. But here was the bummer. I didn't like practicing law. It really just didn't suit me. I didn't like billable hours, but I really loved the energy of these entrepreneurs. And a lot of them had no money, but they loved what they were doing. They had passion about it. And I was attracted to that. So the firm was very kind to say, if you want to take a sabbatical and go get this out of your system, this entrepreneur stuff, then go do it. And so I actually started a software company out here first, and it was with my brothers. One brother was a home builder, and he was my middle brother. I'm the youngest, and my oldest brother was a coder, loved to code. We started, they were working on a software product for the home building industry back in the day. So they basically did their accounting on QuickBooks type thing and then estimating on Excel spreadsheets. There was nothing that really integrated it all for a home builder. And so that's what they were working on for my brother. And ultimately we decided, well, let's take this to the marketplace. It was a product called BuildSoft. And we integrated all that. And this was back when it was DOS days. You don't know what that is either, I'm sure.
I do.
Okay. But it stands for Disk Operating System. It's for Windows front end. So we did that, and 6 years later, we were the number one integrated home building software product in the market. We had about 60 employees. It was unbelievable. But what happened then is my brothers and I had a kind of a falling out, disagreements, and that was not pretty. And in order to try to preserve relationships, we decided we needed to go our separate ways. Very stressful. When attorneys get involved with a business dispute of closely held businesses, et cetera, it can be devastating. And so it really was back then. So, but, family business, and then the stress that put on my marriage, and then the falling out with my brothers. And we just decided we need to get out of here. And so no job, sight unseen. I asked her where she wanted to go, and she said, "Let's go to Colorado." And so we went out and landed in Evergreen because I called out there and I say, "Well, what's near the ski slopes in Denver?" Because I figured I didn't know anything else. And this place called Evergreen on the way 70 there to the ski slopes. And we spent some time just rebuilding our marriage. And I started looking around for things to do. Turned out there was a software company in Colorado Springs called Vendata. They had about 40 employees. And this would have been like in 1995. And they were looking to sell potentially, even though they were very small. And I said, "Well, I'm a lawyer and I can do other things." So it turned out I started there in Colorado Springs as head of their customer services and their general counsel. I guess if we can't work it out with the customer, then goes over to my other hat, which is we get in a lawsuit. I don't know. No.
Well,
Uh,
that's startup for you though, right? You're
that's
probably
it.
also
Yeah, everybody's got to wear all the hats. You've got the black hat. I had multiple color hats too. That's the way you roll. But I was able to work with them. Turns out within a year, they sold the company, the owners, another company, but we stayed as a privately held subsidiary.
okay.
Um, Now we were a subsidiary actually of a public company, but a fully owned subsidiary, and it was called Vendata. And when they left, they made me CEO because I'd had that experience. So in 1996, so a year after I became CEO of this 40 employee company, um, and do you get your unicorn story? That was about a $40 million sale, and in 1996 and 1999, we did build that into a unicorn status. And what I mean by that is we valued over $1 billion, and we sold 10% of it back then. And we had acquired a company called Goldmine Software, and so we changed our name to Goldmine, and that later became something called Front Range Solutions. So that was my first, like learning the system of multiples and, a dollar's not a dollar. Like, how do you make a dollar a $10? And then how that exponentially can grow based on the market. And that was back in the, remember, 99.com days of crazy valuations. That's why I say, like, what does it even mean? Like the valuations, we were a, revenue profitable company, real revenue. It wasn't like those .com busts that really weren't anything, but we were able to piggyback on these crazy multiples, some of which we then saw, like today. Are we in a bubble? Like that was the internet bubble. We're in is an AI bubble. So yeah, and I'm very grateful looking back. Gosh, we did. Our team built a a unicorn company in literally about 4 years, from 40
That's
million to a
amazing.
billion. But a lot of it has to do with factored way. That's why it's like, yeah, we were involved and we were there, but there's so much that goes on to make that work.
Yeah.
So it's not too much to brag on.
But that's why you're such a good leader, is because you have this humility around your success and you give credit to other people. And so not a lot of people sitting in that position would say what you just said. So that speaks a lot to your character. I grew up with the family business as well. My dad owned a business, and I would work there the summers of high school. And the first thing he put me in charge of was collections. And I got to a point where I would say to people, "You're literally taking food off my table. I'm John Cotterman's daughter." And I had like the highest rate of close on collections of anyone that he had ever
You have
paid.
the
So
story behind it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it taught me my sales skills. But I can relate to what you're saying about family, because I think he wanted me to work there for a long time. And then it was clear, towards the end of college, that I got bit by this political bug and wanted to go work on campaigns and be in that hyper aggressive industry. But my mom and my brother did go work with him. I was working in California on a campaign, and every day I would get a call from each of them, and they would each have a very different version of the day's events as it relates to how they were all working together.
Well, then whenever I hear there's like a family business, or let's say a startup where you have some partners that are very close, it's inevitable. Just like marriage, it's a tough relationship, and it's hard to keep them going. And similar in these closely held businesses or family businesses, of all that can go wrong and how that impacts relationships. So I'm very, as we talk to entrepreneurs, there's a lot of people can be fairly naive. It's a dangerous game. and
Yeah.
you hope to upfront do as much as you can that so you can land planes well. In fact, just so you know, begin with the end in mind kind of thing. I'm doing now some mediation. I'm a certified mediator and now in North Carolina. And some of that is just really paying it forward to helping businesses think about relationships. And it's inevitable, not if, but when the business, if it grows, it's going to probably split, divide, people go their separate ways or whatever
Yeah.
smoothly. But
No, in fact, my dad ended up firing my brother on his birthday. So that just tells you
yeah,
how.
okay, there's a huge story there. We
Yeah,
laugh
Yeah.
about it, but it's devastating,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
it didn't go well. It did not go
You know,
well.
when I showed up in a room and there was my mother and there was my father and there was my two brothers, and then there was the local pastor because you always have to we're in the South, you always
Yeah,
have the local pastor in the room in case it all blows up, right?
Yeah.
And I walk into the room and there were two lawyers with the firm I used to work for that then hired them, for our company to fire me. Okay. So totally
Uh,
surprised, right? And so, yeah, those kinds of things don't normally go well, especially,
no.
and sometimes we're short sighted to think that it's worth it for the business to have so much go badly with the family. So I always advise against it, as you can imagine.
I love your honesty about like the toll it takes and how hard you work on things, and to hear that you're actually doing mediation now is amazing. I
Mm.
keep wanting to ask the question on a personal note, if you have been able to repair your relationship with your brothers.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons I came back. They're still alive, and it's one of those things you do your best. Like,
Yeah.
it had a huge ripple effect. Then we moved away, and so you're not together. That being said, I'm all about, I believe, there can be repair. And I think we've come a long ways, and I think we've come a long way since we've been here.
Yeah.
Like my middle brother, we were the two. My oldest brother, the programmer, he was just like, you guys were, freaked him out. But my middle brother, we're similar personalities, and that's where most of that was. We've had some very healing words spoken since I came home. So that was one of the whys because people say why, and I'm like, I'm not real sure, but I think that was definitely one of the whys. That's a great question, Jill, because relationships just matter way more than that other stuff, right? And
Yeah.
how important it is to repair those and do your best to repair them. But we've come a long way. But again, I I'm always cautious, startups and especially family startups and or even any startup where you have good friendships and they get together and what do you do to and shareholder agreements and other ways to make sure that have prenups. It's not a prenup.
Yeah.
It's a share same thing. How do you land the plane and when things can you'd have a difference of where you want to take it and therefore
Yeah.
not going separate ways.
It's true. I mean, in any kind of relationship, there's always that point where you have to go, if we're going to go in this together, let's have the hard conversations now so we kind of know
Yes.
where we stand.
They're a lot less hard now than they'll be in the future. People are way
Yes.
more reasonable. That seems reasonable. That seems fair.
Yeah.
And but you'd be surprised how rarely that is done, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. My father started with a company when he was just starting his career. He was in the automotive industry in Detroit, and he got hired out of the Ford plant to work for Detroit Art Services, which was a family owned business. And it was run by a man and his two sons. And he met my dad and thought, okay, this is the one who can take the company to the next level. And so he made my dad president over the brothers. And that caused a lot of tension.
oh
And
my
my
goodness.
dad spent a lot of his career mediating that with these two brothers. And ultimately, it came down to one was in line with him, and the other one, he and the other brother agreed they had to fire him. And my dad, even till the day he died, would talk about the stress of that. I think he still had stress nightmares about firing the one brother, because the father had passed away, and he just thought, what is he thinking of me? Have I lived up to the expectation of the company? It's just a lot of pressure.
Well, and I'm grateful that I had lived life long enough to like I felt in that scenario, not saying I was right, but I felt like I was the one betrayed, let's say.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, they there's a mutiny against me, and now we got to get out of here, right? Kind of thing. Went to Colorado. But when I was in Colorado, after that company, I talked about Vendetta, Gold Mine. Um, some years later, some, three of us that were there started a new software company. It's called Sharewell Software. And, we're very close. We'd worked together back at Vendetta, but we weren't the owners. Now we're the owners, and we're going to do it better and all that kind of thing. But, related to this topic, we were private equity. The culture changes a lot when you have now, let's call it, these institutional investors involved, right, in your business, and it becomes more mercenary and less missionary mindset of how do we make money, and it's less about the culture of what we're trying to maintain and more about, hey, their noble cause is making money. And so we had to move on with one of our founders, and I had to be the execution. And I'll say to this day, it's my greatest regret in business is firing my partner.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. And I had to tell him later, in fact, right before I left, I got together with him. I just say, I don't know how to say I'm sorry other than I betrayed you. I am sorry. I wish I'd have just, I was a CEO. That's why I'm the, one that the board asked it, right? I could scapegoat the board. But at the end of the day, like, I could have just left. I could have gone with him and said, if you want him to go, we're partners. I'm going with him.
Yeah.
And I regret that to this day. Once again, if there'd have been, a mediator in the room, maybe we could have come up with some. Who knows? But that's being on that side of feeling the pressure of whatever, the money, the system, and caving into it in the moment. But like what you said, your dad looking back, it's a big regret, and that's part of that too in my own life now. Of like, can I make amends by paying it forward of how important this is and how hard it is to be the betrayed, how hard it is to be the betrayer.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about in business and prenups and all of that, it's never a smooth thing. And when you're in the situation, excuse me, I think particularly when you're younger, your priorities and how you assess decision making is different, I imagine, than when you're older. So when I'm ever in a tricky situation, I always add 10 years, right? So I'm like, what would the 54-year-old Keri say about the decision I'm making today? And it always lands on the side of, I want to sleep at night, right? Like, I want my side of the street to be clean, and I want to be able to sleep at night. And that doesn't always mean that I make the decisions that are in my best interest.
That takes a lot of awareness to step out of yourself and try to look at it from, let's call it, the mentor sage perspective versus in the moment. Because there's so many things going on. Like, I didn't want to let down people invested in us, right?
Yeah.
And they're the experts. They know how to do this, supposedly. And so it's very, very messy to have that perspective. In fact, I kind of thought at the time, like, well, the adult thing to do would be, that's what it looks like. Steve Jobs was fired one time. Big mistake, which he proved later. But, that's what they do, right? That's what you do. But as you get older, those things like relationships matter even more. But that being said, you've all been in a scenario where you had to fire an employee.
Yep.
So sometimes you have to fire employees, right? That doesn't make it wrong. So it's complicated.
I went to work in California on a campaign, and I walked in and said hello to everyone, as you would walking into a room, right? And the consultant took me to lunch, and he said, okay, so here's the deal. I didn't hire Susie Sunshine. If you have any friends by the end of the week, you're going back to Colorado. And I had literally just driven to California to work on this campaign, and this is what he said to me. So I went and did a quick assessment of all of the 21-year-old frat bros that were in the room. I put one of them in the middle of the room and publicly fired him. And I can tell you, I did not have a single friend that entire campaign.
Right. Yeah. It's hard, but that's startups, and you don't know what you don't know trying to build a business, right? And everybody's doing their best, and I really believe that, and trying to make the best decisions they can in the moment. But I agree with you, like, how important it is to have, we built Exponential Impact, which is, as you know, that's about, it was all about that. Can we have, have it basically a mentor based model where, that's the culture is you do look to people that have been, some steps ahead of you, years ahead of you, because hopefully they can share some of the wisdom of, it'd be fine and think about this, to help take you down a path that hopefully will avoid some of the landmines along the way.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice. So I have a mentor, the guy that owned the company that we took to unicorn status. He's the one though that sold it first time. But he became a business mentor of mine, and we try to still talk fairly regularly because I respect 20 years, my elder. And he would say, "What's the one thing?" Have you two guys too young to know City Slickers? That
No,
I
I know
love
it.
that movie. I'm
the
old
Yeah.
enough to
kid.
to know about the Durham Bulls.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll come in. Wow, that's just I can see the Durham Bulls Stadium from my deck right here. So
Nice.
Oh, wow. That's
anyway,
Right
in
great.
in
City
the
Slickers,
freezer. Yeah.
it's the thing. Jack Palance. What's the one thing? You remember the one thing? So
Yeah.
I went to this mentor of mine about. I said, in business, what's the one thing? And he said, well, it's quite simple. But it's called take care of your customers. Customers. I said, okay. Well, that makes sense. So what's the number two thing? He said, well, it's just as simple. Take care of your customers. And then, well, third, take care of your customers. So it was the top three and the number one. Um, so if you walked in Sharewell, we named our company Sharewell. It was actually a river that goes through Oxford, England, and it's on that river that J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis used to brainstorm these stories that would survive the test of time. I want our business to be a story that survives the test of time.
Test of time.
And so Lewis and Tolkien, our last office, it was just amazing. It was like Google-like office with rooms. Like it was a Tolkien room and Lewis room and a Rivendell room. But anyway, we had all these rooms, but we etched in the glass. C.S. Lewis quote: "If you put first things first, you get second things. But if you put second things first, you lose both first and second things." And so my story back then was using that as we're going to put our customer first, not money, and money will come as a second thing. You put money first and you're going to lose it. You're going
Yeah.
to lose your first things and not all of it. You're going to lose your customers. You're going to lose it all. But I tell entrepreneurs, I can guarantee you'll be successful if you'll take this one piece of advice. And that is if you have the staying power to survive the test of time, if you got a side hustle. I'm all about side hustles. I had a side hustle as I was building Sharewell. And because it never happens like you think. But if you get it out there and you have time to get customer feedback and to therefore make course corrections and pivots, and then you keep doing it, rinse and repeat, you just keep doing it, you'll figure it out. But most entrepreneurs do not have the time. And they got to then keep figuring out something else out. So I'm always about build your model and your plan around side hustles and whatever it takes to survive the test of time, and then you'll eventually make it. Like Sharewell took 3 to 4 times longer and more money than we ever imagined. But 2 of the 3 of us were out working with our side hustles so that we could support the one that was programmed until we got it figured out. But so that's closely related to the number one, the infinite gain, and number two, how you make a company work is if you can make enough course corrections, you can figure it out.
Did you feel like during any point with Sharewell that you felt the struggle enough where you almost did quit?
Absolutely. I mean, I was all about building companies and the culture. You can tell I got fired up about that kind of thing, building
Yeah.
teams. When money becomes the focus, it just slowly starts eroding things, and you can feel it all across the with everybody. Not just you can just feel it. Like we moved into these new offices, and they were incredible. I was describing it to you: the Tolkien room and the Rivendell room. We had swing sets coming from the ceilings, where you could just nowhere, get in a swing and swing in the middle of the office. We had the the Shire downstairs. We go get go get a pint.
Oh my
And
God. My
so,
husband would have loved to work there.
oh man, I mean, it's just everything you dream of.
Yeah.
But what it I think did to all of us, like I started feeling, you start feeling an entitlement culture that's never enough though.
Mm,
It culture permeates everyone,
yeah.
not just those at the top. And but that's where you got to take responsibility. Um, I remember my mentor guy told me as soon as we took any private equity that that's the beginning of the end. I'm like, oh no, you can't, we still have some control. We can keep the culture, but when you put in motion that other people are investing in you, you want to return their investment, and it becomes
Yeah.
about that of returning the money versus focusing on the customer. So I'm the one responsible for creating the culture. There's going to come a time, and there was with me, where I felt like, Jill, I just, we got so big, and I like small. We're like 700 employees, and I'm like, that's no, I don't know everybody's name anymore.
Yeah.
I grew up with this concept of Cheers, where you want to know everybody's name. That's before your time too, but
Nope.
Nope.
but
Yeah.
and so it got beyond me and what I
Yeah.
enjoyed, right? But it's hard to keep that family feel thing as you bring in all these investors and it grows and you got offices all over the world. I just found I was horrible at doing it, and so I take responsibility because I was the person, until I left. It's so
I don't,
hard.
yeah. And honestly, I don't think you're terrible at it. I don't think anybody can sustain it. I think it's really hard, especially when you think of entrepreneurs creating these great companies. And as they grow, their ability to be entrepreneurial goes away. They're spending all their time trying to, meet the stock market or whatever, and their whole job has changed.
And it's no
Um,
different. It's no different when you take private equity because every quarter they're looking at the numbers, so it feels the same
yeah,
uh, in terms of that short-term focus
yeah,
versus infinite gain.
Yeah,
yeah,
if you gave me the option to make $1 million at Coke to maintain their brand, or make half of that at a startup building something, not every day of the week I go with the startup.
right.
You know,
Every day.
this concept of building something that survives the test of time. If I said right now, speaking, Keri, of $1 million, if I'd give you $1 million right now, or say, I tell you what, for 1 month, Keri, Jill, I'll give you a penny. And the next day I give you 2 pennies. And the day after that, 4 pennies for a month, 31 days. Which do you choose, the $1 million or the 31-day challenge? What would you take?
The penny.
Yeah, because I have your investment.
Yes, because, over time with this compounded effect,
Yeah,
the penny and doubled it every day for 31 days. It's over $10 million.
Yep.
it's amazing.
Mind-boggling, right? And
Yeah,
so I find this true of this thing of willing to delay gratitude, this culture of delaying, until later, what you get is pretty important for entrepreneurs. Are you willing to wait to live on far less now for the long game? The delayed gratification, 31 days, and it's worth 10. I think it's 10.7. I couldn't believe I had Chat GPT to confirm that, but
yeah,
yeah. And
that's
so, yes,
amazing.
I'd say that idea of delayed gratification, waiting, focusing on the customer, and being in it for the long haul, willing to be in it. Because when we started Sharewell, honestly, we didn't take any early money like that. We bootstrapped it. Our customer was our investor, and that's non-dilutive, so it's a great strategy.
Right? Yeah. As you were talking about customer service, customers versus shareholders, I'm just thinking about Facebook. It blows my mind. Facebook does not have customer service. They don't have a chat bot. They don't have a phone number. They do not have customer service at all.
Yeah. When people ask my job description at Sharewell, I'd say, well, I'm the CEO, and that's my job description. C stands for customers. E was employees, customers, employees, and then owners in that order. But it was impossible to do it. I found it got into that mindset of about the money and what's in it for me versus the customer. And I'm not saying that totally was that way, but you can just over time you look back and you go, that was what was happening.
Yeah,
Customers are so much more important than they've ever been with social media, because you have amplifiers, you have influencers, and you have reviews. It's never been more important to have a community of people talking about you in a positive way. So I would say that customers are even more important now than they've ever been, because their lived experience lives on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that survives the test of time, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. I did want to talk about your Substack and talk about like where you are today, because I met you working on a National Science Foundation grant and became very familiar with Exponential Impact, which you founded and helps entrepreneurs do everything that you've been talking about so far in the podcast. And so when I saw on LinkedIn that you had done this Substack, I wasn't surprised. And I wasn't even necessarily surprised about the topic, because I know you to be a very soulful, thoughtful person. But I think I was maybe a little surprised that you put out there so much. So I'm just really interested to hear about that process and what your goals are with it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking. Spirituality is very important to me, especially as you get older. The big questions of the why and death and suffering and what's going on in the world. I mean, the big questions matter, right? And I think we all feel that. Everything can kind of feel a little crazy in terms of the world today and where's it going. And so they are all big questions. I grew up here in North Carolina in a very fire and brimstone. The story was it's fear based, a fear based spirituality of if you don't do this, this, and this, you're going to burn in hell forever kind of story, which honestly most Christians, which is my tradition, grew up in. And so, I brought my kids up in that, was very involved in that kind of thing, and involved in like this men's ministry. But I had my oldest son um, come to me right. He was now in the workplace, had finished college, and he called me and said, Dad, I really need to speak with you about something. And I'm like, what is it? He said, no, it's got to be in person. And I was like, well, gosh, when can we get together? And we couldn't get together for like a week. So my mind's going all over the place. And he almost died at age 16 with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, has the cancer returned? You're as a parent, you're just going all over the place. But he said, Dad, here's the deal. They said, I can't believe in a God of genocide. I can't believe in a God that doesn't think equally of women or of gays, or a God that would condone slavery in any way, shape, or form. And I certainly can't believe in a God that would torture his beloved children forever without any redemptive hope. I'm out. And, I'm like, now, in my world, evangelical upbringing, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my son, my beloved, is going to hell, right? That's my mythology. That's my story. That's what I believe to be true. And, I asked him if he'd be willing to help me take me how he got there. It started something in me because I couldn't, that story was not okay. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to walk with me in it. And he said, no, I'm not here to proselytize. You're my father. I just want to let you know where I am. But I begged him and ultimately said two conditions. You don't check your brain out the door, and that you're willing to change if your heart leads you to change. And, it seemed fair. We started meeting together, up in Denver over a beer. And we just started journeying together and studying some things and going beyond, where all these narratives came from, these stories. And we've ended in a beautiful place. We both consider ourselves come full circle and in many respects, in our minds, transcended where we were. But there's so many parents that I think have. So you heard I have a big passion for mediation. But I also have a passion for mediation in the spiritual sense of these parents and their children, that sometimes the children are estranged, the parents are estranged from their children because of like faith disagreements. I'm like, stop. The relationships are so much more important than that. Than you'd let that little difference in what you believe about the afterlife, which, oh, by the way, no one has a backstage pass to the afterlife. No one knows. It's all theory. And so so to me, I don't know. But I do know how important relationship is and family. I know how important it was to keep my relationship with my son. And I'm grateful that I responded there better than I have sometimes in the business world, that relationship matters so much. And so I want to be a mediator in that world too, of finding common ground for parents and their children to hopefully reconstruct, I call it a faith more based on the life and love of Jesus, of what he really said and what he really did. And just to offer narratives because no one knows. But more importantly, preserve relationship. So I'm a mediator both try to be in the business world of legal disputes and then in the spiritual world, mainly with providing a safe place for parents and their children to go through what my son Colin and I did. And so it's just an offering of you got to be careful. Like I threw it out on Facebook and I could already see the so I just retreated back to Substack because I'm not trying to get into arguments. I'm trying for people who are curious and want to just how do you preserve relationship and find common ground, then it's all free and it's an offering that comes from some of my own wounds, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting when you talk about growing up in fear, right? Christian fear. When you're afraid, you're not asking questions.
Right.
You are sitting on your hands and you're doing what you're told.
Because you think you're in control. It's a way of I'm afraid. I got to do this, this, and this. It's a control mechanism. So you get it. I've been there. I get it.
I grew up Episcopalian, which is like, as they say, Catholic light. So it's like Catholic without the guilt. I distinctly remember a conversation, and I actually think of it often, when I was in high school with someone who did not grow up in a Christian household. So didn't go to church, was very intellectually driven, asking me these questions, right? And so I'm answering the questions about the Bible, some of the logistics, right? Like, where did we come from? Things that you can point to the Bible and have an answer for, right? And then she asked me, she said, but how do you know it's true? And I paused, and I will never forget my answer. I said, faith. That's the only answer. There's no other answer. It's faith. Like you either have it or you don't. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a lot easier to examine some of these questions I've seen you asking on Substack from a point of faith than from a point of fear.
And what do you think the opposite of faith would be?
I think it's apathy. I think it's apathy.
Yeah, some will say doubt or apathy. I believe it's certitude because if you think you don't need faith. And there's so much certitude out there. I so appreciate people that will say, this is what I believe. I don't know. Because again, I haven't died and, seen it all. And,
Right.
what a place that we can then all sit down and go, and just breathe out and go, then we can have a conversation. Like, how did you get there? How did you get your faith? Because at the end of the day, it's so much experiential anyway, right? I mean, the stories in the Bible, the big ones of, Paul's Damascus Road, that was a big experience. It changed him. And Moses, his burning bush changed him. So whether we like it or not, it's just what says the Bible says, but it's even in the Bible, it's their stories and what they experienced. And I think it's C.S. Lewis that said, I can't argue with anybody to see green when they're seeing blue. Your experience of seeing blue is what you experience. So, learning people's story and their background and having a safe place to do that becomes so important. In fact, I try to build some of these narratives and stories, even like you may not know this or may I told you, but if you go on Exponential Impact, there are core, we call them 6 feet.
I definitely know them.
And, it starts with story, innovation, and then health and wellness, and then awareness, and then leadership, operational excellence, and mentoring. They're the 6 peaks. And no one knows this, but if you looked at the first letters of each of those, and the acronym of that is Shalom. It's peace.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so I like to weave, even then I was weaving these spiritual things in. And, at the end of the day, like what I do today, I mean, it's all about Shalom means peace, and a mediator is basically a peacemaker. And so all these themes have been converging. And I just see so many parents and their children and businesses and their partners. It just grieves me because my own experiences. of it blowing up that this feels meaningful. But I got to tell you, it's scary. I
I
feel
bet.
lonely. It's hard. It's hard to blow up. I spent 30 years helping build. I leave it and
Yeah.
go out in the wilderness again because I did that 30 years ago and that was hard, but it was so fruitful. And so I'm hoping that this return, kind of that I like mythology, that hero's journey, returning home for I don't know why, but I think I'm supposed to be here. But who knows? I might end up back up in Colorado someday. I don't know.
It's The
That's
Alchemist. You need to reread The Alchemist.
I
yes.
know. Yes, I do need to read. It's been a long time.
Yeah. I was in this book club when I lived in Texas, and they chose the most atrocious books. And when it was my time to choose a book, like, I'm going to choose a book that maybe will encourage some different conversation, or at least some self-reflection or thought or
Yeah.
something. And so I read The Alchemist, and like, I had everybody read The Alchemist, and like, spoiler alert, right, for anyone who hasn't read it, he starts and ends at the same tree, which is the whole point of the book. And book club ladies totally missed that. And they were talking about, yeah, and it just ends and he's at a tree. I'm like, but it's the same tree.
Tree.
Like, the same tree. That's the whole point. And I think that, at the end of the day, I heard something recently. There's 2 days in your life that aren't 24 hours, and it's the day you're born and the day that you die.
Mark Twain.
Yes, exactly. And it's so true. And it's so profound if you really think about that. And I just love that you're fostering this conversation, because I think so many people in business get so centered around success.
Yeah.
And to grow a business requires faith, whether you have faith in yourself or your team or God or whomever. You have to have faith to jump into the deep end and try and grow something. And I'm really interested to see how your kind of entrepreneur community and your business community come together. I hope they'll join that conversation with you, because I think it's one that we need to have, and it's not something that a lot of people talk about.
Well, as Albert Einstein, who's not known as a theologian because he's a scientist,
Mhm.
it's been said, some disagree, but that he said the most important question you ever ask is the universe friendly? And so,
Mhm.
and this goes to your faith thing, Keri, of like, if you don't believe that, the universe has your back or God has your back, or that I'm going to be okay, that's tough. And I don't know if
Yeah.
kids today or humanity today believes it's going to be okay. And this goes to your faith thing of like, if I have a narrative that, oh my gosh, that the universe would be willing to torture me forever without any redemptive hope, I don't have a vision of it being okay. Because what if I
Right.
mess up? What if I didn't get it right?
Right.
Uh, and so it matters. And I think how we view the universe or God, impacts, what we think is okay in society. Do you think it's okay to seek retribution or punish way beyond the proportional
Yeah.
scope? Revenge. I'm going to avenge 9 times what you did to me. This versus a stance of forgiveness, grace, and mercy, which is infinite love. Like, what is that a possibility? You'll find that that's my most. I love symbolism because it's
Mm-hmm.
deeper. It's that metaphorical thing, and you find all of my logos that I've used for the longest time now, both in Exponential Impact has an infinity symbol. Thrivers, I call it business mediation website, has an infinity symbol, and now this latest stack called Recover Christianity has an infinity symbol. I just want to believe in this infinite loving universe that we're going to be okay.
I totally agree with that. For so long, when I worked in television, and I had a high powered job, 3 kids, driving them to 3 schools, all of that. I was always so busy and kind of got caught in like the rat race of my
Yes.
career and everything else. And I left LA to come to Colorado to be closer to my parents as my father was aging. And I've been here 8 years. It's taken me all this time. And meeting Keri was really great because we kind of found a way to work together. And I never fully appreciated that entrepreneurial mind. But what I do take away from it that I love is that I we have infinite goodwill towards each other. I'm like Keri. I have no desire to take more than what's my share. If she works harder than me, we figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, we're very honest about where we're at. We're both at different points in our lives too.
Mm.
And so finding that balance, I just feel like I'm living such an authentic life now that I didn't have the luxury of living when I was younger and I was in a rat race, and I didn't have the maturity to understand how important that was. And it just took time for me to kind of come to that. I just applaud your willingness to be so vulnerable to say, this is me in all aspects of my life. Yes, I'm an entrepreneur. I've done all these things, but this is my faith and this is important to me. And I feel like I'm doing a greater good with your mediation and things like that. I love your whole story, and I love that you're so open about it. It's so brave to me. It's like you said, things can be really, it's easy to want to retaliate and attack people and go after people, but the harder challenge is to accept and love and just move on from there. I find that when you figure it out, it's like a light goes off and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my God, this is not harder. This is actually so much easier." Giving into the world and coming at it with such compassion and love is way easier than holding grudges and staying angry and all of that. And I mean, I guess I've always been like the glass is half full, so I've always kind of been an optimist. I Talking to you guys right now, I never thought that my optimism was actually my faith, but I do think they're intertwined. I think they really are how I see humanity. Um, and so I love hearing what you're doing and how strongly you feel about it.
Well, thank you, Jill. And I'm also, I think I'm aware of like, I consider what you guys are doing incredibly courageous. And I know Keri, she's mega talented, by the way.
She's
So
fearless, by the way.
I know. And I think it, like, and I also understand like uh, a white male in America that has resources. So it doesn't take the same kind of courage that others have to have.
Mhm.
So I've been very privileged and I get it. I feel like there's some responsibility but it does come out of my heart, my passion. And I think it's Henry Nouwen that said that in this season of life, that sometimes your greatest wounds and heartache conceal your vocation for this second half of life. And if you hear my story with my family and the business and my fear base, which I think was based on my own religious upbringing of fire and brimstone, I see that being true. Where I want to give back now or pay it forward is
Mhm.
all about these areas, like the mediation, looking back at my biggest wounds in life and thinking, gosh, if I can help people there, because I have compassion for it and grace for it. And I feel like since I am privileged, I have nothing to lose and nothing to prove. And, you talk about alchemy, you talk about exponential. It comes, and that's the synergy and that's that compounding, how you get from 40 million to a billion in 4 years, or how you, get from a penny to 10.7 million in 31 days. That's how you see these incredible things happen. It's people coming together to create something from nothing. And that is infinite, by the way. 0 to 1 is mathematically infinite. And so I find that's where the miracles are today. And that's why I love entrepreneurship. I love watching what you guys are doing. I love when anything's new and you're going after it, it just excites me because we're co-creators in something truly
Mhm.
mystical, beautiful, powerful. And so I think that word faith it's a transcendent word that goes beyond what you typically think of it in just the biblical context or religious context. It's so needed to get up the next day that what you're doing matters and people have belief in you and you have belief in others and you come together and do something really, really great together.
And then you have to rebound. That's the thing. Like, I've had a lot of setbacks in my life, but I don't see them that way, right?
Mhm.
It's like I've learned so much from having cancer. I learned so much for spending half of my 30s getting divorced, my father's passing. Like, I've learned so much from that. And I think it does give me a perspective that others at 44 may not have. And it also gives me the ability to see things in a way that they should be, not the way that they are.
Right.
And I didn't used to have the ability to decipher what should require my attention and what shouldn't, because I'm a golden retriever and I get excited about every opportunity that I see in my head, right? Like I've learned that is not a good thing. And so my current challenge to myself is to be more deferential when I see the world as I think it should be. It's not always your job to go and make it that way. But I do think it is your job to see if other people are trying to do that and build out that ecosystem, be a part of the solution, and, be a team. Like you cannot change the world by yourself.
Right. No. I went down a lot of different deconstruction and spiritual traditions, came back to Christianity because I like the pattern of death and resurrection. It's in everything. It's in nature. It's in the story of Jesus and the death and the resurrection. And it just seems to be the pattern of everything. And you can believe it. That's the faith that it's those dark nights of the soul when we don't have any hope that everything's going to be okay. And yet something happens bigger than us that we feel that, oh my gosh, this opens up beyond us, bigger than us, right? And that does start building faith that, you know, that pattern is in everything. And
Yeah.
that's why I kind of returned to Christianity because I just so believe in that pattern. But it's important to have in those two steps backwards or those dark nights of the soul, to have people in our life that know us and can encourage us. And that's why, the Exponential Impact, we had that mentoring model because, I could even see it now because you talk about that Substack I'm doing. Keri, nobody cares. Like, what I mean is like back in the day, I'd be like, I'm out of this. Nobody cares. And then I listen to myself and going, well, I still get passionate about it. And there's no response to it yet. But, I don't know. I had one text and that's got to be enough right now. And just to be okay, I know the pattern though. As we get older, we remember that things resurrect. But I want to be able to pivot. And we all need to be humble enough to say, well, it's not quite like that, but that would lead to that over here.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, that's the pattern. And that's what we can encourage each other with when we're going through these dark nights of soul, which I know you've had, I've had. And Jill, I don't know your story, but you touched on a couple things there. So life is hard.
Yeah,
Life is really hard.
it is. I
And
remember I'm divorced and remarried. And when I was going through my divorce, I remember thinking, I'm not going to survive this. How do I do this? My kids were young. And then my mom died. So they kind of both happened like one
yeah,
after the other. So this was in my 30s. I think Keri and I share this. My therapist that I was going to regularly going through my divorce and my mom's death had to have open heart surgery. And so she said, okay, while I'm gone, go talk to this other woman. So I went to this other woman and she had the best advice, but she said, look, I don't need to know your story. We're not going to be together for very long. You may see me 2 or 3 times before you go back to your other therapist. So what I want you to do is when you're at home and you're dealing with your trauma, I want you to just sit there and go to the worst possible place. I want you to think of how bad it'll get. What she was basically saying, what are you most afraid of? Live in that for a minute, sit with that fear, and then go on to your next fear and keep doing it. So I sat there one night in bed and I lost it. Like I'm losing it now, remembering the just gut wrenching anguish of all my fears that were going to come up, that no one would love me after this, and I would lose my kids, and all these horrible thoughts that I went through. And just sitting with all those fears, the next day they were just gone. It was like the most empowering thing ever. And it was just like, do not let fear control your life. Just live with it, get in there and feel it, and then see that you can pull the curtain back and you're right where you were when you started, and that the sky is not falling. You know what I mean? And it helped me deal with everything after that. When I got laid off at a company I'd been at for 19 years, that was crushing on my ego and everything. And yet I got through it because I just realized, you know what, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. Everything's happening for a reason, and there's going to be a brighter thing on the other side. And I'd heard all these stories about, you know, Steve Jobs getting fired, Lee Iacocca. You hear the stories about like a batting average in baseball. If you're really good, you're hitting just under half the times. It's like 0.5 is like a great batting average. So half the time.
Like 0.3.
Yeah.
Nobody bats anymore 500 even. So that's exactly right. But we don't, we misinterpret that. Like a lot of people look at my story and they don't know my dark nights of the soul. They don't know my weeping. They don't know me being curled up in the corner thinking I'm going to die or wanting to die. Right. We just rarely share some of those things where we don't give people permission to be real. And therefore they think that everybody else has it all together and they don't. And so, yes, the best thing we can do for each other and for people is vulnerability, right? And authenticity. Say, no, it's hard. And yet, like to your testimony, that somehow you're lifted up and you're going to be okay. And you're like, I didn't orchestrate getting back up, but something picked me back up. Sometimes other people, but sometimes it's just, it's other. This is that pointing to the moon without touching the moon, right?
Yeah.
That's why I so love mythology, because we all tear up when we see a movie and it touches that something in us and we go, that's it, but it just points to it. But there are certain words that don't have, we need poetry, other things to point to, and other people's stories, words like love. What does that really mean? Or suffering. I mean, it's just a word. I think it's just so important to share story and, connect the dots and give each other hope and faith. And I think if we remember that the opposite of faith is certitude, this idea of,
I like that.
I don't know. That's the great place to be, because now it takes just faith and, what do we feel? What do we sense? Because what do we really know? Right. And it takes faith, and people with a positive certitude, like, how do you really know? But they don't. And thanks for Jill, you sharing some more of your story, because I think how many people out there are dealing right now with going through a divorce or going through cancer, stories we just kind of brought up. Hopefully that brings hope.
Yeah, we're in good company. I think a lot of us have been through it.
Of humanity.
Yes, right?
It's also interesting. I find the people that are the most certain about their convictions tend to have the least amount of faith. So I think you're absolutely right about that being the opposite, not apathy.
Yeah, and they don't have a backstage pass to the afterlife either, or to anything.
Nobody does.
How does anybody say they know? I don't.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot about it just takes the pressure off. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and to be open to always learning, like you sitting with your son and having a conversation, and your first fear is, oh, he's going to burn in hell if he doesn't believe in these beliefs. And then you're kind of like, this is my son. He's always going to be with me. I love him. And I just want to get to know how he sees the world. My father was the same way. My dad was always willing to learn something new. My dad was always curious, always willing to open his mind. My sister's gay. That took my dad a minute to get his head around it, but he was right there to support her. That's the one takeaway for me. The best advice I ever got is certainty doesn't get you anything. It just stops the road, stops growth, it stops compassion. Always be open-minded to learn something new, because there's so much out there you don't know anything about.
There's two things that make me the happiest: when I'm solving problems and when I'm learning something.
Yeah.
And those two things usually go hand in hand. Yeah. Well, Vance, thank you so much for coming on our show. I know that we are a new endeavor, but for the people that are listening, where would you want people to follow you?
Called Recover Christianity. I have a YouTube channel called Recover Christianity. And I have a website, www.recoverchristianity.org.
Well, I always appreciate your insights into life and business, and I always feel blessed and humbled to get your time, because I know everyone's time is precious and you're very busy. So I really am very grateful that you gave us so much of your time today.
I'm delighted to be asked. It means the world to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got somebody wants to talk to me. So I thank you. You care and you'd want to reach out and have a conversation. I'm honored.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you, and I loved your honesty and openness, and I didn't know it would go the direction that it went, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So thank you.
Well, to your credit, because you guys are the facilitators, you allowed it to be open and let it go where it's supposed to go. So thank you,
hmm
Jill, Keri. You guys are delightful, mega talented, and I wish you all the best. I think you're going to crush it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You can find today's guest, Vance Brown, at recoverchristianity.org, and you can find us at 2bu.co. That's TWOBU.co. Do good, do it now, and do it often.